Hello everyone, my name is Manish Bhardia and welcome to the True Stories in Tech podcast. I'm with a company named Think AI Consulting and today I'm here with Brian Iinuma, President of Strategic Systems Group, Eddie Bader, CEO of Aegis Innovators, Eric Klauss, CEO, Partner Source Solutions. So Eddie, please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Manish. Eddie Bader, as Manish said, I handle operations for Aegis Innovators. We're a modern IT services company, so we focus on enabling the modern workplace, and we also implement security and compliance through a zero trust environment. So happy to be on the show today.
Great, Brian. Let's have you speak about your company.
Thank you, Manish. This is Brian Iinuma. Our company is Strategic Systems Group. We are a Los Angeles-based IT consulting firm and experts in enterprise resource planning. Our tagline is Transformation to the Intelligent Enterprise. We primarily help manufacturing and distribution companies, training, consulting, software development for the ERP applications that run their business.
Awesome, Brian. Eric, please go ahead.
Hey everyone, Eric Klauss with Partner Source Solutions. We're a Microsoft Dynamics partner. We focus primarily on Dynamics 365, ERP and CRM solutions, and we are co-authors with Brian of 3 books on enterprise resource planning and CRM solutions.
Awesome. And again, with Think AI Consulting, we are pretty much focused on software development related to the modern technologies like artificial intelligence, so custom AI and chatbot, SharePoint, and custom applications. And today's topic we have is about training. And with that, I would ask if any of you would like to start with a training story.
Sure, I'll jump in. I'll tell you one back from my Disney days. We were doing a SAP implementation, and our project team was comprised of some developers, and then there was the kind of the tech side of the team, and then the business side of the team. So what happened is I was kind of responsible for training in my area of expertise, and I went into a training class, and they said, look, here's what we want you to train, but just know all of it doesn't work right now. So just start training and we'll call you when you can go to the next section. So I spent like an 8-hour training session waiting for phone calls to like being able to go to the next section. So I would go through a section not knowing, how long I was supposed to take. And then the training rooms at that, at that location were called mouse pads. So we had mouse pad 1, mouse pad 2. Those are the training rooms. So I'd phone ring. I'd get on the phone. Okay, you can show this piece now. So I spent the whole day like waiting to see what part I could train, but I had to know it all and be ready to do it all. Or, hey, this is a good time, everybody, for a break. So everybody go on a break and buy us some time on the back end. And we didn't really let anybody know what was going on. But those are kind of fun times because normally it would be a high stress situation, but everybody was doing their best they could, and it ended up being very seamless to our trainees, and we got really good reviews on that session. So it's just a funny experience that if you haven't gone through it before, I wouldn't recommend it all the time, but every now and then it can be fun.
So Eddie, one question, is that was a training like a technical training, or was that more about the process?
Yeah, so we were actually teaching the end users how to do their job in the new environment. So we were actually, the SAP implementation was replacing maybe 4 to 5 other systems, and we were showing each group. This would happen to be a group called Ticket Control. So they are in charge of auditing all the tickets and things like that for the park entries that day. And we had a new system, so we had to make sure that they could continue to do their work as before, because we at the time we were doing daily audits. So all that needed to be happening. So we had to train him on how to do everything a new way, and it was much significantly different than it was with the old system. So that was it was an interesting time.
Awesome. That's good. Any other training, Eric? Training story, Eric or Brian?
Well, I guess I'll say, training is always a fun thing in the business applications world, especially when you're getting started with the brand new systems. Frequently, what we'll do is at the very beginning of a new project, we'll do a high level overview of the system. Now, this is after the customer has bought the software. But before we've gotten into the real, soup to nuts detail of the implementation. So this is high level training. Here's how the system works. And what's frequently fun about that is that all of a sudden, in many cases, you get people seeing things in the software or thinking that they see things in the software that maybe they haven't seen before and that they want to be able to use. And so it opens up a whole lot of conversation around, could we do this? 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 Which is always really fun. But also it's it's a bit of chaos, kind of along the lines of what Eddie was describing in his situation. But you end up with a little bit of a chaos situation because whatever you thought your agenda was, it can quickly go out the window real quickly because people have more questions, and frequently they have really, really good questions. It becomes almost a kind of a discovery session of what is it that they want to be able to do that maybe had never been discussed before because the client never thought about asking these questions. And now all of a sudden they see something in a system and it starts to trigger a thought process for them on, could we do, these different things that they want the system to potentially be able to do for them. And so I love doing those kinds of sessions because you really get people sometimes out of their preconceived notions of what they thought they were going to do with the system, and you start to get into some areas of really exploring what could the system do for them that maybe they hadn't really thought about before.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
Hey there, Manish. I have one.
Sure.
So this is one of those stories that it looks like training, but it's not training. Or rather, it looks like training, but that's not the problem. So we were called into a client site, and the client was having some trouble after a migration. So they migrated from an older legacy application to Infor ERP LN. So the data migration was done, and they were basically in training phase. So basically, we ended up going down the road of training and basically looked at some of the stuff that they were doing and said, yeah, for the things that are brand new, we can provide training on the things that are brand new. However, for the things that were part of the data migration, those things aren't working. So we can do some things for you in terms of training. We can help on brand new transactions, but we're not going to be able to help you much at all for the things that are migrated. So I think we were maybe one of the first to point out that training wasn't the problem, that their data migration was problematic.
Yeah, I think expectation management or managing client expectation is the challenge, because training is the time when they are taking the ownership, right? You're transferring the ownership from our team to their team because now they will be running with it. So it was great to see that you were able to handle that well. So that's great. I would also add a little bit in the sense, whenever we are doing training, I handle mostly SharePoint intranet piece of the training, which is very structured. We have like 20-step process kind of scenario, and it goes well. But at one time, I was doing project online training, and I had the structure. I never bothered to check how many attendees will come. And really, there were like 2 sessions, and each session had like 30 attendees. So, like, total 60 to 60 people we are. And the room itself was like 10 people it can accommodate. Now, it had a sliding door, so they opened it because, so it was, the scenario was they had the small training room or meeting room, I would say, with a big monitor, and that meeting room was opening into the kitchen. So kitchen had a big area. So they were able to fit 30 people, but I realized the logistics was such a big issue because I was ready to give presentation to 10 people and had the energy to talk to 10 people. But when 30 comes without mic, I have to shout for 4 hours. that that one was very challenging. So I was drained by the time the meeting was done, and I had the lesson that, when we are going for training, yes, focus on agenda, focus on every role who is coming to the training, but also focus on how it will be delivered, whether small room, big room, the logistics and all. Yeah. So any other ideas on how to improve the training?
Well, let's talk about virtual training since we're living in today's COVID-19 world, and a lot of the training and probably services that all of us are delivering today, it's all being done online. So what are some of the challenges that you deal with virtual training, and what are some ways to make that better?
Yes. So I think on the question on that is, have you delivered any virtual training recently or in the past? Let's start with that and that experience.
Maybe I have a little bit to contribute, maybe not so much in terms of having delivered training, but to sort of be a part of a remote learning environment. So have any of you gone through a class on EDX?
No, I have not.
So I've been through one. It was on data science. It was a combination of a video, but there was a fixed cadence where each week there was a portion to cover, and then some video to watch, and then a bit of maybe exam uh, quiz type questions. As I recall, there was a final exam as well. But basically, it was following a cadence where people in the class were all following the same steps, essentially. And then there were office hours where the instructors who were in the video were available to answer questions, and then a chance for people to interact with each other. So that was kind of interesting. I thought the content was good, and then to be able to take quizzes and get certification and so forth, also helpful. But the part that I thought was really interesting was the interaction with the other students. So we're all in the same boat, all learning together. I thought that was quite interesting.
I'm a more sit in the classroom kind of guy, but I think that with that last thing that you just pointed out is the thing that doesn't always happen unless the instructor facilitates it, and that's the engagement of students with one another. So yeah, it does happen in a virtual setting, and it does happen in the actual physical classroom, but I still like that bottom in seat kind of thing for myself.
So do you like that sort of interaction with other students in a training?
Yeah, but I guess when I'm thinking about virtual or a traditional classroom, I actually prefer the traditional classroom.
Sure.
I thrive on that interaction primarily with the instructor to build that relationship and kind of go a little bit deeper in conversation, right? Because there's sometimes it's funny. I think that it's probably better because it's a better equalizer. I think in a virtual setting, more people are apt to ask questions. In the classroom setting, less people are willing to raise their hands. So sometimes it doesn't bother me. So I kind of thrive off that interaction and that kind of mentorship that an instructor provides. I don't feel the same when it's online.
I think that's true for the instructors as well. I have a friend of mine who is a professor at a university, and in the COVID-19 world now, they're all being pushed to do more and more online classes, and he has a background. So he's been a friend of mine since we were little kids. I mean, literally like 9 years old. So I've known him forever, and he had a long background before becoming a professor in a school, in an educational world. He had a background in theater, and very much enjoyed, doing plays, doing musicals, performing. And I think that there are some teachers in particular who are probably very good at what they do, who take that performance element to teaching. And the challenge around that, just like with actors, and it's the same reason why you see for a lot of actors, they like doing plays in front of a live audience more so than they like doing, let's see, TV or movies. And it's because you can get that interaction with the audience. And I think for a lot of teachers, professors, it's the same thing. When you're live in front of a classroom, you can get that energy, you can get that feedback from your audience on, is whatever it is you're trying to present landing. When you're trying to do it in a digital world online, it's much more challenging around that. And I think that's something you have to take into account. Any kind of training that you're doing to try and come up with mechanisms to make it more interactive when you're doing it virtually, because you don't have natively the kinds of things that you have when you're doing it in person.
I think Eddie touched on an important point, and as did Eric, that maybe in this COVID-19 new normal, the trick to training might be having good moderation. First of all, the primary moderator who is leading the coursework might be the key person, but there might be some others folks that are helping as well. So for example, in the most recent IMCP meeting that was held virtually, while Manish led the meeting, there were a number of us that were kind of in the background, sort of helping moderate and field questions and so forth as we kind of went along. So that process of moderation and maybe having more than one person moderate might be a key.
Yeah, I think it absolutely helps to have other helpers, so that whoever the presenter, whoever the teacher, if you will, is, they can focus on the core elements of whatever it is that they're trying to drive, but having other people who can help with questions that come up and field that, so that from the presenter standpoint, they can stay focused, and you can have other people kind of tackling the other things. I've actually done that from a training standpoint as well, where whoever is going to be the primary instructor, if you will, they're driving through, whether it's a PowerPoint presentation or a live, interaction with whatever system that maybe is being shown, whatever that is. But then you've got, 2 or 3 other people, depending upon how big the group is, who are, working directly with the students, engaging with them and answering any questions, and just making sure that they're following along and able to stay on pace with whatever the instructor is trying to get through.
Yeah, I think on that, I want to add that when we talk about the training, the key point is to have the training environment ready and rehearsal. So, Brian, to touch back on your point, at IMCP meeting, we did the practice and everything was pre-rehearsed. Same thing when it's done in training, it comes out and then it's a great learning experience for the student. And coming to the in-person versus virtual, I think whether you deliver in-person or virtual, now virtual has become a part of it anyway, because you will record the meeting. So the review of the training is mostly virtual. So that we have to keep in mind always. So now it's just that initial delivery is also going virtual, right? Initially it would be do physically and then recording is virtual, but now it's pretty much everything virtual going on. Right. Okay. So with that, anybody has more tips on the training or the type of training you have found really beneficial for yourself or your company?
So I think as technology is our career, right? That's what we're doing. I think for us, I do enjoy a good training session from a partner who understands how we're going to look at it, our perspective. But I think a lot of us just, without the formality of lab coats and protective gear, we go into our technology lab and just kind of start playing around. And I think that's a lot of fun too. Some of these new things that are in preview, and if you don't really know what that means, an older reference might be it's like the beta. So you're getting to test some new functionality that hasn't been rolled out to everyone yet. Playing around with that, trying to change configuration settings on something like, let's say, Teams, right? Just really understanding how to do it and going through some events, live events or normal meetings, and just really trained by doing it. I enjoy that a lot, and I think it's very beneficial. One of the things, in my opinion, is whenever I do training, I try and keep the training to what I know that my class is going to be using. So I try not to waste time on things that I know that it's going to be very rare if they use that, because I don't think they'll retain it. And one of the things I recommend is instead of blanket training, obviously you do that when you're moving to a new system, but if you wanted to learn a new application, then come with very specific things of what you want to do and what you want to be able to do, or how you want this to actually help you in some way. Because when you come with a specific list, I think you retain much more, because you have a purpose, you have a goal in mind. If I just brought you into a room and say, hey, I'm going to teach you on Excel today, you may or may not care about that. And so, one, I'm not going to keep your attention through the session, and two, you probably retain very little. So I think that necessity, that desire or goal that you have in place, and if that's, use that as a driver, I think that's when you are most sponge-like. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, that's good, Eddie. I have a couple of things to add. So when Manish asked about tips, the things that have helped us in the past, uh, there was a situation where we had a chance to bring a group of clients together. So it wasn't just one client, but it was actually a handful. So we asked one of the clients who was in Portland, Oregon, to host for us, and we basically all flew to Portland, Oregon for this training. This happened to be a software development training. So we have some folks using the Infor MK application, which is very like the Infor Bond toolkit. So the training was basically to help them develop software. Lots of things that are kind of fundamental, like screens, I guess call them forms and reports and sessions. And then also there was an element of software development in something called program scripts, which was kind of like C sort of, but it was basically code. One of the things that was sort of useful, I thought, was we asked them to bring real work. So maybe they couldn't bring exactly the project that they were working on, but at least conceptually they could describe it. to say, yes, you guys need to have something done when you guys get back. So maybe let's go through it now and try and structure something that you can actually take home with you and then implement on your own systems. I think to Eddie's point, that was very much engaging, something that was really useful to them, not just the training by itself.
Yeah, well, I think that's, I mean, anytime you're doing a training for someone, one of the things that I saw, years ago is if, for example, implementation of a new technology solution, if especially business apps, if I just train you on generic sample data, it doesn't have a lot of meaning for the users, and so they it doesn't sink in, it doesn't hit home the way that it should. But if we import in some of their business data, for example, and they're seeing some customer names and some items and some dollars that they're used to seeing, for example, now it sinks home in a way that I think it doesn't if you just try and train very generically. So one of the things that I always look at when we're going through training with a client is, don't just use a sample system or some kind of a generic sandbox environment, but actually bring in real customer data, their data, to show it to them. And I think that really helps that educational element to sink in and hit home.
Yeah, I think definitely doing a custom training is what we are suggesting here. It's always very helpful for the client or the team members, but generic than generic training. But I think there must be some value in generic training also, right? So I know we are thinking that custom training is the best, but is there a place for even generic training also? Just open question here.
I think, Manish, you're correct. I think there is a spot for generic training. But maybe it's at the very beginning of the training that kind of applies to kind of everybody in the room. So I think that overview, structure of an application, for example, that sort of thing is pretty important, just so that they have a sense of what the whole picture looks like. Then I think, to Eric's point, to get down to some very specific things, the customer's data, for example, I think that's also very important. So maybe there needs to be some sort of hybrid in terms of how that the training should go. So we had thought through something for ourselves in terms of for our own clients. Maybe not necessarily to follow the EDX model, but to at least take a lesson or two from it. So we thought about having a portion of it in video, and that might be that sort of generalized portion that everybody can benefit from, because it's something that everybody needs to know about structure and so forth of the application. But then once that is done, then I think there's an opportunity to do some things that are more specific to the client. But maybe that has to be done, maybe not so much in a group setting, but potentially one-on-one, once the group training had concluded. So that was one of the things we had thought through, was to try to insert some video to try and maybe improve the profitability of the project, but to also insert some video that was sort of general, that everybody could benefit from. One of the other things that sort of comes to mind is that in a training scenario, just like the one I described earlier in Portland, Oregon, to try and bring together some number of clients, maybe from different walks of life, different areas of industry, but to have a group of people that potentially has never met each other, to be able to join the training and to interact and bring some of their discussions about problems that they've experienced in their own workplaces to the discussion, and get something back from other folks that might have done it differently. That might be a pretty good way to add value to the training.
Brian, I agree. On that piece, we have had a training where multiple clients came just as a refresher, because it was a lunch and learn scenario, but some training element, and that interaction between clients and teaching each other or relating to the scenario was pretty great conversation and learning. So yeah, I would definitely think about doing the training also. So you are suggesting more like a joint training, right? Like, I mean, right now we are virtual, but have more about joint training for multiple clients.
I think that's appropriate. So just like us, for example, we have all come from different walks of life and different experiences, but yet in our work together, we're pretty good about exchanging ideas. So things that have worked for us in the past could benefit Eddie, for example.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let me ask you this around the room. Coming to the business, Brian, if you were to train, what will be the training focus the SSG will pick on, and then similar for Eddie and Eric, and then I'll also answer that.
Okay, Manish, that's a good question. Thank you. I was thinking back to something that we had done in our very early days, and in fact, I was working on a little bit of video to kind of describe that scenario. Way back, maybe 1995, 1996, thereabouts, a lot of our work was in custom software development, and maybe specifically for the Infor applications, not so much VB and SQL. But that sort of training was needed back then. As things kind of have evolved, maybe that training is a little bit less important, although I think it's still valuable. But it seems like, as far as SSG is concerned, a lot of our training is more about the application and how to use the application well. Part of what we do for clients has to do with business process. So a business process analysis is an appropriate first step to kind of understand how the business flows. And then once we understand that, then to take a look at the system to see how well the system fits the business process. And that's where the training gets to be a little bit interesting. So as we talked about before, maybe the generic training might not be as valuable as training that is meant to fit the business process that's in place in the organization. That's where I think some real value comes from.
So you would actually understand the business process and then train? Is that the objective?
Yes, I think that would be ideal. In situations where we have implementations, that is exactly what we do. Go through the business process analysis first, and then go through the process of getting the system in place.
Awesome. That's pretty good. Okay, Eddie, you maybe you can share your idea of training your clients.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think you have to know where they are, what they're trying to accomplish. A lot of times, though, companies are just looking to, we use this term lift and shift, right? They're just looking to do what they did yesterday, today, with the new technology. And when you take that mentality, you're leaving so much on the table. So what I try and do with my clients is think about, what is your wish list? Like, what's those things that you're like, oh, I wish we could do this, I wish we could do that, because I think a lot of times those things are really possible. And I look at technology not for what it is, but for what it can be. And when you take that approach, you start trying to use technology in different ways, or you figure out solutions that, we'll use Teams. Teams is a great application. It's got a lot of depth. It's not a unified communications platform, but there's so many components to it, and it's hard to master it all. But what are you really trying to accomplish? How are you trying to make changes from that? And I think, showing them the basic way to use it, but also having an inclination of where they're trying to get to, what are some of their current roadblocks, and again, to Brian's point about their processes, like what's archaic, what can be updated, even if they're not thinking that. You as somebody in technology knows that, hey, there's probably a better way to do this, and we have some thoughts. So in addition to training them on the basic functions, I like to feed them some ideas about, hey, do you do this on your regular? Do you have this kind of situation come up? Oh yeah, okay. Well, how do you handle that now? And they'll tell you, and then you're like, oh, well, what if you could do it like this? And you give them an example, and they're like, oh yeah, that's great. Okay, let's do it. So you kind of shift you make some fluid decisions during training. I don't like to be too rigid with it because I think the best training is kind of like the best presentations where there's some interaction between speaker and guest, and you really kind of get that feedback. I think it's important. So if you know the system well enough and you can adapt on the fly, I find it to be really engaging for the students or the attendees of that training session. So those are things that I use on a regular basis.
And the question to be specific related technology, your company trains clients on which area will that be? Like Azure mostly?
We do modern workplace, so Teams, virtual desktops, a lot of basic components. We can train on all the core applications like Word and Excel and PowerPoint, all that stuff too. But I think the biggest thing that we get requests for now is Microsoft Teams, because it's so dynamic and there are a lot of different components. So I would say that that's probably where we do the majority of our work.
That's pretty good. And Eric, any final thoughts on what kind of training you as a company would provide?
Well, I mean, we do training around Dynamics 365 for clients. We have a number of projects that are ongoing right now. The other side is one that I think I've worked with. I know I've worked with Brian. I think I've worked with Eddie. We've done workshops and presentations in the past on doing sales training for clients and doing just kind of general, high level sessions on, what is CRM? What are some of the technology solutions that we all work with for the audience that's out there that's maybe not familiar with these tools or even, what they can do. So, that's kind of a big focus for what we do is really, like I said, on the Dynamics 365 stuff, but more generically on, what is CRM, what is ERP, how do you know if you need it for your business? Excellent.
And with Think AI, we are pretty much focused on collaboration. So more like SharePoint teams and a lot of data related training we do. And now with chatbot, AI training and all. And if is there any final thoughts? Otherwise, we'll wrap up for today's podcast. Okay, so with that, thank you for listening to the True Stories in Tech podcast. Please join us next week for more True Stories in Tech. I'm Manish Bhardia with Think AI, and I'm here with Brian, Eddie, and Eric. Thank you, everyone.